Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Lisa Burkhardt-Worley, author of The Only Father I Ever Knew. Lisa, welcome to the show.
It's great to be on the show, Paul.
Are you ready to get started?
Yes, I am.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, I've got to tell you something. I started this book that just came out almost 20 years ago, and it took me 20 years to get it out there. And why? Because I really wasn't a disciplined writer. So I think it's very important to be disciplined. Now, I've had a number of books since before this book. I was disciplined on them, and it wasn't really the time for this book. But you must schedule time to write. I just recently heard a movie producer, Phil Cook, present a talk, and one of the things he said stuck with me. He said, it's important to establish a routine. He was talking about a producer of movies that used to go to the same place. He would go to the same breakfast place. He would go to the same lunch place. He would go to the same afternoon place. He would go to the same dinner place. And every time he was there, he would write. So a routine, discipline is very important. And he gave me permission to plant myself in the seat. And that is something every writer has to do. You can't wait until you're inspired. You just have to sit down and you have to just ponder what you're supposed to write. Because if you don't sit down in the chair to write and pick that time to write, you're never going to get anything done. Max Lucado, who's a very successful Christian author, said he schedules time. Because if you don't schedule time, then you're going to get busy with other activities and you're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, it's the power of habit and just being consistent with it.
That's right. You have to establish a routine. Now, my time to write is in the morning. You have to really, Paul, you got to go with what's best for you. I'm a morning person. I get up at 5 or 5:30. And so I'll start writing in the morning, spend an hour or two, and then I'll get ready for the day and go off to work or whatever else I'm doing that day. But, that's when I'm fresh and that's when I'm creative. And so that is when I sit in the chair and get the writing done.
Yeah, you got to be able to write when the inspiration hits. And if you're a morning person, that's perfect. When you get that early morning spark and just get on with it.
That's right.
Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, as you know, it's very difficult to be traditionally published. About 0.5% are traditionally published. I've tried it myself. I'm self-published on all 8 of my books. I made it to the top of the tier of a traditional publisher, and this last one, The Only Father I Ever Knew, it's not the writing, but it's platform. And if you don't have a platform with about 100,000 followers or so, it's very difficult to get traditionally published. But even if you self-publish, you've got to be really careful about who you go with. You still want to find a self-publisher or a custom publisher who's going to care about your book, who pays attention to detail. You can always get a literary agent to help you, but you also want a literary agent that will open some big doors and care about your book and is not too busy with other successful authors. One of the things I found out through this process is there are a lot of publishers out there who will use Amazon CreateSpace and label themselves as a traditional publisher when in reality you could do that yourself. You're just paying a lot more money. So, I've paid $10,000, $12,000 to do to self-publish or custom publish books. Then I've also paid next to nothing by using CreateSpace. This last book, I had someone edit it. That cost me about several $1,000s because that was important to me. I think editing is one of the critical things you must do as an author.
Yes.
But then I also hired somebody to just format the book for me and put it on CreateSpace. So instead of $10,000 to $12,000, I paid about $5,000 to publish this book, and it pained me to go with CreateSpace, honestly, because I just had a dream of being traditionally published, but it's just the way it had to be, and it looks great. It has a great cover and I think it's well done. And so, I think you have to decide what works for you. And some people will get traditionally published, but you can go in and try for that. I think everybody needs to try, but if not, you have to consider what's out there as far as customer self-publishing.
Well, you bring a couple of great points with that. And one thing I always mention to prospective clients is I always encourage them to shop around. And they're like, really? I said, yeah. And I said, ask these potential publishers or coaches or whoever, if you're going to shop around, ask them what their core values are. And if they can't answer that question, then you probably should find somebody else. Because you need to make sure that you're working with people that you can trust and know that they're going to get the job done.
That's right. And one of the things I like is personal contact. One of my books, I used a publisher that had kind of a cart system where you just check off things you wanted, and I never dealt with anybody and a person when I had questions. It was always via email or via the website. And I know maybe that's a sign of times to come, but I think there's still people out there that will talk to you and that will answer your questions personally. So I actually moved that book to another publisher who was more of a friend. And so I think that's important. You got to really decide what is it you want, and do you want personal connections with your publisher? I do, but not everybody needs that.
Yeah, well, what I found is most people want that connection, and most importantly, I'm a really big karma guy. So I believe it goes around, comes around. You do good, you help other people, and you make that your priority, it's going to come back in a great way. But if you're just in this for a quick buck and just to make money, then it's going to come back in a different way as well. And my philosophy has always been customer-centric. My company's core values are truth and service, where we walk you through the process, we let you know the expectations, but the most important thing is that we're here to help. And if there's any questions that you need, I always give them my personal cell number. And they can call me anytime. There's something that they need help with or support. They need to know that someone's there for them. They don't need to get a hold of some call-in center, and who knows where that call-in center actually is. So it's one of those things where you have to be able to have someone that you like, and you trust, and that you know that they're going to be there for you and to have your back and support you throughout the book launch. Because what I found is when you take good care of clients, they come back. And you're gonna help them with multiple books, and they're gonna recommend people, and that is the best way, in my view, to take care of people properly.
You're right, Paul. A lot of publishers don't realize that if they do a good work for you and they have that personal contact with you, you're going to tell other people, and they're going to multiply their business. But if the author has a bad experience, then they're going to tell 50. I used to be in the television business. I was a sportscaster for a number of years, and we always realized that if you were rude or if you weren't very nice to one person, they were going to tell 50 people, or else you'd be written up in the newspaper. So it's really important to provide good service.
Absolutely. And this is going to go nicely into our next question, and that is about marketing. Because it's the same thing. You do things right, everything's marketed well. You do things poorly, gets marketed a whole different direction. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
Well, I hired a publicist for this book. This book's very important to me. It's to help the fatherless. My own fatherless story is in there, and I have 16 other fatherless testimonies, and I talk about God as Father. This is just my heart, and so I wanted it to get out there. So I hired a publicist for the first time because I have a PR, television, some marketing background, so I've done my own PR releases and things like that in the past. But this one I needed some help, and so I did hire a publicist. One of the things they did, which whoever's listening to this podcast can do themselves, actually I wrote it, is I came up with 7 to 8 questions about the book. Not only did I come up with the questions, but I came up with the answers to those questions. And so that was sent out with the book and the press release. And lo and behold, one major magazine, Charisma magazine, very big Christian magazine, published those questions and answers as if they were doing the interview with me. And they put it all over Twitter and Facebook and everything and promoted it. And that's only because I took the time to do it. It takes a little time. But I guarantee it really opens some doors for either magazine or radio interviews. Radio stations don't know you, and if you provide, do the work for them, they're more apt to put you on the radio. And so it works with all sorts of media outlets. So that's what I would say is just a great thing you can do. Just take questions about your book and then answer those questions and then send it out with your press release.
So this is basically almost like it's an addendum, correct? Like an additional file?
Yes, it's an additional file. For my press kit, we have a press release. We have we have my bio, my ministry page about what that's about, and then we have questions without the answers. Then we also have questions with the answers. And so there are a number of pages that come with the press kit. And then that either goes through email or we send it with the book to radio stations. I've had several, one national. Actually, I'm going to be on one national radio broadcast on the USA Network in November to talk about the book. And I sent her the press kit. And then we've got another one on Moody Radio, which is a big radio outlet, and she's considering it, but I sent her the same thing. And so this just helps the radio person. It allows them to understand your book and what your purpose is, and makes their job easier.
Yeah, and that is such a great strategy to have those questions in there, because you're right. It's one of those things where everyone's always looking for content. Local TV, local radio, regional, national, they always need new stories. And if you already have that content ready where they can literally just read off of it, then they can take that, they can interview, they can repurpose it. There's so many great things that you can do with that information. Right.
It just makes their job easy. And I think you're going to get more opportunities if you do that. Now, I remember in my last books, I did a radio broadcast with a station out of Prescott, Arizona, and I didn't do this. I didn't do my questions and answers, but they asked me to do it. And so they did a fabulous job. That show's not on the air anymore, but they did a fabulous job putting music inserts in there, and they really prepared for it because my book was called If I Only Had. And so they went with a Wizard of Oz theme and made it very interesting and had Wizard of Oz music through it because, the Scarecrow said, if I only had a brain. And so that's one of our chapters. So it was a fun interview, and I think it sparks some ideas with the media outlet that you're trying to reach.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
I thought about this a while. I love books and I love to read books when I have a chance, especially when I travel. But I really love the book The Shack, and one of the reasons I'm choosing that one is because that book was not a traditionally published book to start. So this gives everybody hope. That book was a self-published book that made it into the New York Times bestseller list. And the reason why I like this book is because I'm a Christian. I'm a seminary grad. I'm in ministry. But the reason why I love this book so much is because it teaches people that God still pursues us and loves us even when we're upset with him. Because the main character in this book was very upset with God and turned away because his daughter was killed. And so he had a hard time dealing with that. But the book is all about God's pursuit of mankind. And so I think that's my favorite book. I loved it, and it's impacted me over the years. I still think about it. And, of course, I love the movie.
Yeah, that's such a great example. The Shack and The Martian, I think, are the two best examples of how, indie books or self-published, however you want to call it, how those books can get out there and make such a big difference. Because I truly have the belief that every single person has a story in them, and it doesn't matter whether you're going the indie route, traditionally published. Just get that story out there, because everyone has that story that they want to share. And those two books in particular were such great examples of that. Right.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with people and their stories, I hear so many people talk about how they want to write a book and they have plans to write a book, but they never do.
Yep.
And then again, it's because they haven't set a discipline of writing. I actually did that message, the discipline of writing, at this writers conference over the summer, and I had to learn it myself. You have to sit down. Back to that whole talk. You've got to carve out time. It's got to be like a job. You've got to get on your calendar and say, okay, for 2 hours today, I'm going to write. I'm going to turn off my phone. I'm going to close. I'm going to close myself off in some room, and I'm just going to focus on it. So I hate it when people never accomplish. I have a friend up in New York who keeps saying she's going to write, but she never does, and I think that's because she doesn't take the time to sit down and do it.
It's either that or they just don't think they have the story. I think imposter syndrome is a really big challenge as well, where people think, well, my story's not good enough, or I'm not good enough to be a writer or an author. And I'm going to tell you right now, everyone that's listened to this show has that ability. Everyone out there has the ability. You just have to be able to have the discipline to get started. One of my favorite quotes is from Lao Tzu, where they talk about the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first steps. And it's the same thing. Just start one day, budget an hour time out, turn off the Wi-Fi on your laptop, turn off your phone, and just start writing, turn off the TV, and just let it flow. See what comes out.
Yeah, in the writing world, we call that dumping. And I think it doesn't have to be pretty, right?
No.
It just write down everything that comes to mind. Just dump your thoughts onto a piece of paper or onto your Word document, and just dump it out. See, I think some people think it has to be perfect. No, it doesn't have to be perfect. When you first write it down, it's going to be anywhere from perfect, but you want to get it on paper. Then it's like a piece of art. It's like a sculpture. Yeah, then you start to carve, and then you start to mold and create this product that is your book. And then you can send it to an editor, and they carve it some more and make it even prettier and make it shine. And so but unless you start dumping and start the process, then you're not going to be able to complete the book.
Absolutely. And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, I have looked up a lot of writing quotes for this talk I did on the discipline of writing over the summer, and I found this great one. It's a sports quote, and as I said, I was a sportscaster for so many years, love sports, and it's by an author named Bill Copeland, and this is what he said about goals, because let me just preface this by saying you must set goals to get your book done. I'm working with another author right now to do a book about broken mothers and having a mom's compassion for your own mother. And so we're setting goals. We're saying, okay, we're going to have this many chapters done by this date. We're going to have the book finished by this date, because that helps you to get it accomplished. But if you don't have goals, this is what Bill Copeland says. The trouble with not having a goal is that you can spend your life running up and down the field and never score.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that powerful, right? Just running in circles. And so we must have goals in writing in order to get these books written and out there. And so I've learned that with my own life. I write a lot of, I'm a list maker, and to get things accomplished, I check off the list, and I write goals that I want to accomplish. And I do a lot of speaking, and so I have to, again, just like book writing, I have to carve out the time to put my message together and set goals to have this particular message done by this date, or it's just the same thing. And so you have to set goals. You have to write everything down and say, this is when I'm going to have this done, because if you speak it and you write it down, you're more apt to complete it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I have a Facebook group. It's a free group that I always invite people to join. It's called Get Published. And every single Monday, I do a post. And the main thing I talk about is your goals. I say, hey, team, Just Do It Monday. One of my books was called Just Do It, which was based on battling procrastination and getting goals done. And I always ask them, what is their top 3 goals for the week? And it can be business, it can be personal. And I always invite them to type their goals in the comments. And I always add an FYI. So the FYI always shows that statistics show people who write down their goals have over an 80% higher success rate of achieving them. And I actually think it's much higher than that. And I also put my own goals in there as well. So this week, what I actually did was I always do like really good graphic images. So it's going to grab their attention to get that visual. And this one had a graphic image that showed 83% of people with no goals and the success rate. And we talk about 14% have they have the goals in their heads, and then 3% people have the written goals. And it shows that the people that have the goals in their head are 10 times as successful, and then it increases when it actually has the written goals. And people with written goals, it shows here, are up to 30 times more successful. And I think it really got the attention because I had a lot of people writing this week in particular about their goals for the week. And I do that just to give them a little taste of what it's like to work with a publisher and to work with a coach, because we talk about having that focus and having that accountability. And someone that tells you, hey, what are your goals? Because you need to at least have them documented somewhere. It needs to be written down, or at least speak about it bare minimum, but you've got to have goals to constantly be working on. Otherwise, you're never going to get them done.
And be positive about it.
Yes.
Actually say, I will have this book finished by May 2019. You know, don't say, I hope to have this book finished by May 2019.
Yes.
Be positive. And if you don't, it's okay. But at least you're probably going to be closer to your goal than you would have been if you hadn't set one.
Absolutely. In my Get Published book, I always tell people these are some of the things you need to look at. But one of the main things in regards to getting this done is have yourself, as you talked about, have an hour a day or 2 hours a day and just focus on your book. Because if you're one of these people that writes when the inspiration hits, that's great. But if you're not, then at minimum, schedule time every day, schedule an hour, schedule 2 hours, because once they do that and they stay consistent, like you mentioned, they're going to get that book done.
That's right.
Well, Lisa,
yeah, I've talked to a number of people who've gotten a book done in 1 month because they've been disciplined.
My very first book I did in 3 days. Second book I did in a week. And most of the books that I do are typically done between 1 to 4 weeks, just depending on how much detail. If they're how-to guides, obviously it's a little more intricate. But typically, with me personally, I can have a book done within a few weeks. And it's one of the things I always show my clients. You can have a book done as soon as 90 days. However, if you need more time, that's fine. But you just need to get into the daily habit of working towards those goals of getting your book done.
That's right.
Well, Lisa, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, I have a ministry. It's called Pearls of Promise. I'm at pearlsofpromiseministries.com. I blog regularly and have all sorts of things on that website, including podcasts and my books. And I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. And do a radio show called A Time to Dream. It's at atimetodream.org.
Well, Lisa, I want to thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.